All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Jim Crispino. I'm a senior director in product management for the Developer Center here at Genesys, and I also help out on the App Founder team. And we're doing them quarterly now. We're going to do this an Ask Us Anything session for developer-related topics. And let's see, before we get started, we are recording this. We'll have it available on our YouTube channel, and we'll post it as a link on the Developer Center at developer.genesys.cloud under video. So as this is an Ask Me Anything session, if you have some questions, please post them in the Q&A widget of Zoom, not in the chat. I'd like to get them in the Q&A so I can manage those a little better. So I have a couple of questions that have been asked ahead of time, and we'll go through those. But before we do that, I am going to, I want to show you a couple of topics. So let me end my slideshow and get rid of that. All right. I want to show you some kind of upcoming features in Genesys Cloud that have recently become available to enhance some existing functionality that we have. I'll give you a little background. We had our Experience customer conference 2 weeks ago now. And in setting up for that, I set up a demo. I wanted to show folks a trigger in action. So triggers are our ability to define if this event happens in Genesys Cloud, then fire this action, then perform this action. And in setting that up, we've had triggers for a while. When they first came out, you could only set up a trigger using the API, which was kind of frustrating. Then they added on an admin interface to define a trigger, and now they've got a testing tool in triggers, and we've got testing tools in workflows and in data actions. And I was able to troubleshoot my trigger end to end, like make sure everything was going to work without kind of having to send messages somewhere and monitor logs. And so I kind of want to just take a few minutes and show you some of what I ran into in setting that up and how you can troubleshoot your triggers end to end if you're using those. So it's pretty cool. Triggers and workflows and data actions, they're kind of what we throw into the category of low code, no code event mechanisms in Genesys Cloud. So the fact that you can actually troubleshoot them end to end relatively easy is pretty cool too. So first of all, I've come into Genesys, into the Developer Center, and I went to the available topics, and I'm going to use this activities trigger, user activity. So I've got this set up. I've got this set up to monitor my user account on my org, and I created a channel and I subscribed. So it's down here in my notification tool, and I'm getting notifications. So if I change my status, let me change my status to busy, and I come back over here. This event should be the busy. So there it is. So I got the busy. So I'm going to need that here in a moment. If I go to Genesys Cloud and I go to admin, I'm already on admin. I'm going to go to architect and the architect section, and I'm going to go into my trigger. So I created an agent activity trigger. And so I said, if that event happens, if I see that event for any user, right, the triggers run as a wild card on the parameter. So if any user activity fires, then I kind of want to review that trigger. I want to invoke a specific workflow. So this is an architect workflow. It's kind of like a call flow, kind of like an email or chat flow, except it's not linked to any specific interaction type. It's out there, it's able to be invoked, and it'll be invoked by this trigger. And I'm going to send it the entire JSON of the event. Now, I don't really want to operate on all users. I want to operate on only my users. So I grabbed my user ID and I said, if an activity event occurs for this identifier, for this user, then that's when I want to invoke the agent activity trigger. And up until recently, you've never been able to kind of know, is my trigger actually going to operate properly? You can kind of eyeball it and say, yeah, it looks all right. But the actual like testing of it was difficult. It was you would wonder, you'd scratch your head, why didn't my workflow run? Right. So we have the save button down at the bottom, but we also have save and test. And if you do save and test, you can post in an example of the event body and see if your trigger meets all the criteria. So if I go back to that event, and let me just copy that. Where's my copy button? There it is. So let me copy that. I'm going to put it all in the clipboard, come over here, and I'm going to paste it in. You can type this by hand, but it's easier just to grab the actual event that would have been fired by the system. And if you click test, it's going to run through. It's going to say, yes, I validated that the event matches my topic. So that v2.user.id.activity, this is the correct event. Did it match my target? And it did. And does it match my criteria? Yes, it did. And I can actually test. Let's see if I change the user ID to something else and run the test. It's that event for a different user would not go through my match criteria, so my workflow would not be invoked. So if I change that back and I test it, sure enough, it all matches. So that's really nice. It's not perfect, right? If the system's running, there's no way to monitor events and see that they're actually firing. But at least I have some clue setting up that trigger. Now, here's the really cool thing. When you go into Architect and you go into workflows, so again, workflows are a type of flow that aren't linked to any specific interaction type. And I'm going to go into the workflow I set up for this. Now, when you've been using workflows or call flows or chat flows or email flows, you've always had to sprinkle in flow outcomes or maybe log a message to some system to kind of figure out, kind of like sprinkling printfs around your C code. Putting a log message in to figure out where you're at in your flow and why it failed. You haven't been able to really test out your architect flows, but we're on the cusp of releasing an architect debugger, and this is like totally cool. So I can go into my execution history for this flow. We've added a button, or we're going to be adding a button called execution history. And here, this should be the one I just ran today at 10:06, just a few minutes ago, my time. And if I bring this up, it's going to bring up a view of architect in a debugger mode. So this is really slick. Think about a debugger like you would use in Visual Studio or something like that, or in your Java IDE. This is taking the snapshot of the invocation of this flow on that specific invocation. So I did that test. I did that test from the trigger. That test actually did invoke that workflow. So I am running with that data that I pasted into my trigger test. And here on the right, kind of like you're used to your debugger, you can see the variables of your flow and your state. You can actually expand that JSON data, and you can see, I know that's hard to see there. Let me bring this over a little bit. But you can see the JSON that was sent in as an input to this flow. So it came in as a flow.json data variable, and it's in here. And then I'm at this step. So it executed this step. And so state.userid, I pulled out some data, routing status, and presence. And so if I step, so I have a step over I don't want to step in, I want to step over. Step over. All of a sudden, it took that JSON. So it executed that update data step. It went through the JSON. It executed my toString of parsing the JSON data. And it populated some state variables in the flow based on the values of that JSON data. And it took the success path. So it called my data action and it took the success path. And you can just keep stepping through, step over, step into. So we are about to release this as a debugger in general availability across all regions. It's right on the cusp. So I would say in the next week or two, maybe a couple of weeks, this should be out. And let's see, what else did I want to show you? There is a way to test launch a flow. So you can, if you don't want to wait, if you don't have another way to kick off that flow and you just want to, you're in Architect and you want to test it right here, if you pass in that data as, here, this will let you set the input to the flow and you can launch that. And again, it will run. Sachin, I saw you post in your question. Yeah, we're recording this. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel, and it'll be available under videos on the Developer Center. All right, so that ran. Test launch is kind of anticlimactic, right? It runs, it kind of shows you a little status that it's running and it tested, but the execution history is here. And there it is, 10:13. So you can go in with that test execution that you just ran and step through. So it's just another way to invoke it and see it working. So and then of course you've got data actions. I have a data action that my flow, let's close this. I'm calling this data action. And we've always had the ability to go and test a data action. So I've got that over here. Just show you that real quick for those who maybe aren't familiar with data actions. I've got an experience data action here. And on a data action, this is a request where I'm just calling one of the Genesys Cloud webhooks. I'm sending a message. I can pass a message and some metadata in as input. So I'm sending that in the body. And we have the ability to test this as well. So I can say this is a message to test and this is some metadata and I can run that. And this one ran successfully and you can see the JSON output. It's a webhook that just accepts a post and doesn't really reply, but you can kind of step through your data action and test that. And all that did was post a message into a chat group. So you can see in UC chat, you can see the things that came from my architect flow, and you can see that message I just sent in from my data action. So what I wanted to show you there is our no-code, low-code tools in Genesys Cloud are evolving to the point that you can do some troubleshooting and some debugging on things. The architect stuff is really cool because that's not just for triggers, that's for call flows. You can go into an inbound call flow, look at the execution history, pick a call from a point in time and step through and figure out what path did it take through your call flow? Why did it not take the path that you wanted it to? And so really, really pretty exciting stuff coming up. So with that, that's kind of what I wanted to show you today. And now I'm going to get to the questions. So we had a couple of questions asked up front. So let me get to those. We've got Lee Smith. Lee, I'm not sure if you're on, but you've recently started using Agent Assist Transcription summary for web messaging interactions, and your web messaging timeout is set for 72 hours. So you asked, is there any way for the transcription summary to just summarize the just ended part of the interaction instead of the full thing? There is not. Web messaging is it's designed to be an asynchronous messaging channel. It can be used for those kind of web chats that happen like real time on a website, but it's also designed to be a long-running asynchronous conversation as well. And when I say that, it's kind of like those message threads you have on your iPhone or your Android device, um, where you're chatting with your family or friends that, you send a message and an hour later they respond back, and the next day you reply. And so it can run, it has a lifetime. It can run indefinitely, but by default, it's 72 hours with Genesys. So that interaction, those web messaging interactions don't really wrap up for 3 days, right? We have a 3-day period. And so even though your agent may be ending a part of that conversation continues through its lifetime until there's no activity for 3 days. So when it's summarizing, it's assuming it's summarizing the entire conversation for that conversation lifetime. So if you want it shorter, you're going to have to change that lifetime to a shorter time period than 72 hours of inactivity. If you're just doing web messaging and using it as a replacement for web chat on a website, you might want to think of really restricting that idle timeout down to a shorter period so that it treats those more as kind of a one and done kind of interaction and not a long-lived interaction. So hope that answered that. Lee, if it didn't, if you're on, you can post into the Q&A and I'll either bring you on and we can talk some more about it, or I can answer further questions. All right, next one's from Giuseppe Santo. I'm not sure I have an answer for this, but we'll see. So you want to create an event wrapper used in your web-based application. So you want to subscribe to a notification topic, just like I did when I started this out. But the Genesys SDKs, you're using WebSockets, and the Genesys SDKs do not provide the lower level WebSocket mechanism. That's up to you to use in your development platform of choice. So you use whatever WebSocket library that you want to use to establish a WebSocket with Genesys. And then your question was really around, how do you set up high availability, hot standby kind of thing for your application? So again, that's an implementation detail that Genesys isn't going to take care of for you. You're going to have to manage that yourself. I have seen folks do high availability with WebSockets. Essentially, what you have to do is have 2 WebSockets established with different channels, but subscribe to the same topics on each WebSocket. So they're both live, and it'll be up to you as to which one you're consuming events from, right? You don't want to consume events from both live WebSockets because you'll get duplicate events. So you're going to have to pick one to be the primary, consume events off that, but the secondary is live and getting the same events. And so if the primary WebSocket ever fails, you can hot switch, right? You just flip a flag to start processing from the secondary WebSocket. And at the same time, you're trying to reestablish the primary. And it'll be up to you if when the primary comes back online, whether you switch to the primary or whether you stay on the secondary and it becomes the primary, and when you reestablish the WebSocket, that becomes the backup. So again, those are implementation details of how you implement your code, but that's how you would do hot standby with the WebSocket notification API. You did ask, how does Genesys manage high availability WebSockets in the Genesys Cloud UI? And I would say we probably are not doing a hot standby on our WebSockets, right? If you just reload the browser, reload the desktop app, and it'll reestablish that WebSocket. If the WebSocket goes down, you can test this, right? Like pull pull if you're on Ethernet or on Wi-Fi, just disconnect the networking for a little bit while you're logged into Genesys Cloud, and you'll see it kind of go into a darkened mode and trying to reestablish connection. Once you turn on your Wi-Fi or plug in your Ethernet cable again, then you're gonna see Genesys Cloud reestablish that WebSocket. So anyway, I don't think our UI is doing a hot standby WebSocket, but I know there are some some customers who wrote some server-side applications to do that. And then we've got another question from, I can't say that name, Sabapati T. I didn't get that. Hope you're on. In a voice bot flow, is it possible to support both ASR and DTMF simultaneously? I don't believe that it is. I believe in a voice bot flow, if you are recognizing audio, it's gonna expect ASR. It's not gonna expect DTMF. I think the bot flow builder, like in Architect, would need a separate block if you wanted them to enter DTMF. I think it's all built around ASR. That would be a question probably to ask on the community forums at community.genesys.cloud. About how to do that. If there's a way to do it, I've never done it, but our community at community.genesys.com, there's a lot of people out there, and they're very active forums. If you post in and see if anybody's been able to do that, you will likely get an answer. All right, and then you also asked, is in the voice bot flow, after collecting speech input from the customer, is it possible to add processing music while the bot to recognize the input before verification? I'm not sure exactly what use case. That's not enough context for me to answer that. I know if you're like calling a data action to validate that input on a third party or even Genesys Cloud, if you're calling a Genesys Cloud API to validate something, you can play music while you can play a prompt file, which the prompt file can be music. I think you can play that during the data action. And if that's what you're asking, that's how I would do it. I don't know if the native blocks for verification and stuff in collecting prompts and collecting that speech input has the ability to set a prompt file, but if you're using it after you've collected it to validate it, I'm pretty sure there are certain blocks where you can play that prompt file. All right. Let's see. I've got another question here. I'm not sure where this is going to pop up. There we go. Okay, this was one. I don't have the name of the person who asked this. This came in via email. It says, when an outsourcer sends a SIP message refer to Genesys Cloud, Genesys Cloud forwards the SIP refer to the carrier on the trunk, or does Genesys Cloud keep it on its own side and engages the agent? So I think what that's asking is, you've got a BPO or some outsourcer that's got a call. They want to send that to a Genesys Cloud call center, right? So the SIP refer comes over, and I think they want to know whether the SIP refer actually goes to, we send it to the carrier and let the carrier take over that call and drop the BPO out. I think that's what this is asking. Or whether the BPO stays in the SIP path. Does Genesys keep it on their side and engage the agent? I think that is most likely up to your SIP implementation on whether you drop out or not. I think it's on the side of the call sending in, whether when that SIP refer happens, whether you're staying in the SIP stream or not. I know Genesys can actually handle both. We do this with like voice bot vendors, what'll happen is a call will land on Genesys and we transfer it out to a third-party voice bot provider. They'll handle it. And then when they're done, they can do a SIP refer back into Genesys with giving us the intent and the slots and everything that they filled. But that SIP refer, the voice bot will drop out and Genesys will take over that call. But there are some use cases where the voice bot vendor stays in the SIP path, in the RTP path, and can keep that audio. So I think it's up to the third-party side as to how they stay in or drop out of the SIP path on that. But I mean, Genesys can take over the call, definitely, and we will send that on to an agent. Whether the sending side stays in the path is up to them. All right, Matthew Raleigh, how can you posted in here, you're online, I guess. How can I connect to the transcript notification service? I tried on my own and got no results. Thanks. All right. Transcript notifications. So Matthew, you might post in again. I'm hoping it's voice. Let's do this. Let me think how to set up this example. We'll do this on the fly. Yes, voice. All right, good. Let me go to the Dev Center. I'm going to switch over to my org instead of John's org. Let me switch here. All right, let's go transcripts. Transcription. All right, so to set this up, I'm actually going to do this. So Matthew, pay attention. You can watch the recording afterwards. Let me get a call in. I'm going to call my number. Let me go on queue. Sorry, that's going to get some feedback. Sir. All right, so I got a call. To actually operate on this, I've got to go get that conversation ID. So give me 1 minute to go to interactions, to today, to that call. Let me grab that conversation ID. Let's hop over to our available topics. So transcription, you subscribe. Let me make that a little bigger so you guys can see that. You subscribe based on a conversation ID. So let me paste that in here. And I'm going to add a channel and I'm going to subscribe and I'm going to come down here and do this. All right. So I have subscribed to transcription events for that specific call. Getting the call ID, getting the conversation ID is a lesson left up to the student. So Matthew, you'll have to get that yourself. Hopefully you've got some mechanism to monitor calls that pass through a queue or land on an agent or something, and you want to get those transcription events. So I've subscribed to those. So let me, I'm going to try, right. I turn down my speaker 1 second. Hi, this is the customer speaking, and I'd like to speak with customer service. This is not going to work, is it? There it is. There it is. So there's my event, and I apologize, I can't make this bigger. Let's do this. Let's copy this. Let me bring up Visual Studio Code, new file, text. Paste that in and we can just see, we can look at this event here. So this is the external side. So this is the customer side of the call. And it says it determined with 97.55% confidence that this is what they said. They said, hi, this is the customer speaking and I'd like to speak with customer service. So it did a pretty good job there, and it can do the agent side as well. So if we go back to our call, and I take the agent side off. Hi, this is the agent side of the conversation. I'd be happy to help you with your customer service needs today. All right, so let's go back to our topics. We should have a new topic down here. Let's grab that one. put that in Visual Studio Code. Did I close that off? Maybe I closed that. Guess I dropped. Sorry, let me bring that up again. No, here it is. Untitled. Yeah, sorry. Guess that was off my screen. All right, so we've got that. That was the customer side. And I drop this in. So this is the internal side. So this is the agent side. And it said with 96.82% confidence, this is what I said. Hi, this is the agent side of the conversation. I'd be happy to help you with your customer service needs today. So, Matthew, I hope that's what you were looking for. You do have to subscribe if you're so two things about that. If you're using the WebSockets, if you're using the notification API with WebSockets, you have to subscribe to each individual conversation that's occurring. And so you have to have that conversation ID. If you're using AWS Event Bridge, so if you're having Genesys, if you've installed the Event Bridge integration and you're having Genesys send events out, you do not have to subscribe by ID, which is really cool, but then it's everything. So it's all conversations. And on the Event Bridge side, you'd have to build some filtering or in your Lambdas filter out what conversations you want. But yeah, so non-wildcard with WebSockets, wildcard with Event Bridge. But those transcription events can go out of Event Bridge as well. So, all right. Let's see. I'm going to kind of powering through the questions here. All right, Marcus Hanna, more of a comment than a question. He uses Python. When trying to utilize APIs, I start with API Explorer until I begin having successful calls. Great. Now I take that Python example provided in the API Explorer and develop that into working code. It's proven difficult, and from one API to the next, they are not the same. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the others. I wish there were examples of basic code for a given API that would work with Python. I spend hours trying to find the magic recipe every time. And Marcus, I might open up. Maybe we can talk about this because I'd like to understand that a little bit more. I'm going to allow you to talk. You can talk or not. If you don't want to talk, that's fine.
No, I've got it.
Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this when you're using Python. What you're using examples from the APIs in Python, but they're not working when you paste them into your code?
Correct. Yeah, for each API, you have the different types of code examples, and there's one for Python, and it gives me some of what I need, but there's never an example of what the body of the message should be formatted like. So it's like you're always trying to figure out exactly what it wants. And I'm not a coder, so I'll just tell you that up front.
Yeah.
But we've got a couple of developers in our analytics team, and what I generally try to do is get the API at least up and running with successful calls in my Python IDE, and then I hand it off to them so they can do all the fancy stuff with it.
Okay. Well, so let's just pick. I'm not gonna get this right, but let's. I have a conversation ID. Let's put that in. Oh, that's not right. I had a conversation ID. Let's see if I can still get that. This is not a mess. So this isn't really going to work, but as you build this out, right, it should test. Add an email, jim.crispino@genesys.com. Right, so it's building that out, and then we should be able to see that in Python. So you're saying Oh, I see what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, none of that ever flows into
None
that
of that
window.
flows down into that. Oh.
And I expanded on that comment a little bit to say, for example, I just finally got the API Python to develop to be able to add contacts to my existing outbound voice campaign contact list. So now we can add contacts, and I needed help from the forum and everything to get the syntax right. So great. On occasion, we need to update some information on the contact, maybe a new phone number or something. Need to run that. There's a different put API to update an existing contact. You just need the contact ID and the contact list ID. Fine. So I would think from the API that we developed to do the initial contact load that the syntax would be generally the same. It would be happy with that, and you could do updates, but it doesn't work that way.
Huh.
So it's kind of like, okay, now I got to start over and figure out how should the body of this message be formatted.
Yeah, I'm following you. I'm following you. I'm kind of puzzling through how we might resolve some of this. Let's see. I'm going to keep those 1 second here. All right. Marcus, let me do a little investigation and figure that out. One thing I might ask you to do is, have you ever used the ideas portal on Genesys Cloud?
Yes.
Okay. Would you post an idea on there to enhance the SDK production to include the body in the output?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to.
Can I give you that as an action item? That way I won't forget, right? And luckily that idea is going to come to me because I am the product manager for the developer center now. So I will work with the team and see if we can't get that on the backlog as an enhancement to the developer center. I think that's really good. And I'll look at your example on the updating a contact and why it's different from one API to the next. That might be a little more difficult to solve, but I'll look at it and see if we can't do something around that.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. All right. Marcus, you can mute yourself if you want. Apparently I can't. Apparently I can allow you to talk, but I can't take it away from you. So go ahead and mute yourself if you want. And we'll go on to the next question. Let's see. Answered those. All right. I'm actually not seeing any more questions. If you have another question on anything related to development, or maybe not related to development, I would be happy to try and take a stab at answering for you. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, maybe we'll just wrap it up there. And we're going to try and we're going to be doing these series quarterly now. So that kind of an ask me anything session quarterly. In the meantime, as we get new features that we want to expose to y'all, it's like work items are out, but we've already done a work item topic. But as we get new development related topics, we'll probably have a DevCast sprinkled in here and there between the quarterly ones on a specific topic where it really is more of a webinar instead of a question and answer session. But thanks all for joining, and we will catch you on the next one. All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.